Hello, today I will show you how to prepare finite element mesh or PoligonSoft cutting simulation software, and we use mesh generator alone, and it's a free software and it is supplied with the PoligonSoft. Now I will run it with this button mesh. There are two models here, a geometry model to prepare CAD geometry for meshing and a mesh model to generate mesh. I will start with geometry. And now I will input my CAD geometry file input, and here you can select get file, and I usually use step because every CAD system can export in step format, and I will press it. And here is my example. And the first question is about units. I use the millimeters in CAD system, and mesh generator use meters units. The question is about, do I want to change my units millimeters to meters? And I don't want to change units, so I press no button. And here is some question about partition operation. This operation is to find contact surfaces between casting and mold and other parts of casting. So I will press yes, and geometry input completed successfully. If I want to rotate geometry, I will use left mouse button. To scale, I will roll wheel, and the middle button is to drag geometry. Here we see the result of input, and this part is not useful. And this partition and bodies inside, I will work with this part of tree. If I will click here, the same body will be checked here. I can use this eyes to turn the display on and display off geometry object. I see that here is a mold, and I can rename it mold. And here is a casting body. And here is a riser 1 and riser 2. I do it for more comfortable work during mesh generation. So we don't need to do anything here, but I want to show you the first model that was inputted here. Here it is, and if you will display both its bodies, and if I will find mold here, I will find casting and display off it that there are no cavity in mold. So I didn't make abstraction Boolean operation in CAD system for more comfortable and more simple work here. And this operation partition makes this cavity in mold. So I see it here. And all contact surfaces were found by this operation partition. So now I have fully prepared model for mesh generation, and I will go to mesh model. I will create several meshes with different element size because casting has thin walls, and I have big risers, and I have very big mold. The first mesh, the main mesh, I need to create from this partition element, main element. So I click here and press this button create mesh, or I can use mesh menu, but I like these buttons. So I press create mesh, and here I see some tabs, and I will prepare 3D mesh, but before it, I want to prepare 2D mesh. I can prepare 3D mesh in one step using this NetGen 1D, 2D, 3D algorithm. But first of all, I want to see 2D mesh because I want to have good mesh on surface. So I want to see it before I will prepare 3D. And so I will do this step now. I will select algorithm, NetGen 1D, 2D, and I need to create some rules, element sizes for this mesh. And this main mesh will be global mesh. So I will create some rules for whole geometry, and I have big mold dimensions. So I will use max mesh size 70 millimeters, and the min size I usually use 1 millimeter. And here I can set finances, and this is how element size will be changed during generation. And usually I use cross. It's enough for testing simulation. Cross. Okay. Apply and close. And the first element was created in tree, mesh one. And this is common rules for all bodies in my geometry. But I have casting here, and I want to create some other rules for casting because I want to have mesh here with smaller element size. So I click here on my main mesh and press right mouse button, and I can here create submesh, or I can select from this toolbar, create submesh, and do the same operation, but here's some field geometry and I need to click on casting. So you see name of submesh, some parent object, mesh one, and geometry object casting. So go to 2D and select again 1D 2D algorithm and my new rules. For example, 5 millimeters max size and 1 millimeter minimum size, and my mesh quality will be force line close, and we have some other object, submesh, and parent object is mesh one. It's not the end. I have risers, and I think that the mesh size and risers need to be some between mesh size in mold and mesh size in casting. So not so big like 70 millimeters, but not so small as 5 millimeters. So I create another submesh, click here on my parent object, mesh one, right mouse button, create submesh, and click here, riser one, and with control button to riser two, see here two objects, 2D tab, again 1D, 2D, and new rules. For example, 10 millimeters maximum size and 1 millimeter minimum size, and course here, K, and apply and almost. And here is a question. I have two submeshes and they have a context surface, and generator asks me about order of submesh computation. The first mesh is the mesh with more smaller element size, and this is submesh one, and this order is right. If not, you can change it. Example like this. And I press apply and close. We see parent object here and two submeshes. And here we see our applied rules for parent mesh and for two submeshes. The full information is here. And now I can generate my first mesh. I can do it in one click. If I press here and press compute button or press it here, I will create full mesh in one click. But first of all, I want to see mesh quality in casting. So I will click on submesh one and click compute. Here is the report, and it was successful. And I see my mesh. And I think it's okay. So I can create submesh 2 to see mesh and rises. Here it is. And we see fine mesh here, and of course, more big element size here. And we see that mesh is a coincidence between casting and riders. And finally, I can create other elements. I will click here and compute. And this mesh looks too big. So I want to change element size, right mouse button here and edit mesh. Go to 2D tab and press this button to edit my rules. So I think that 70 is too big and I will use 50. And I will compute it again. Now it looks good. Now I can generate 3D, but first of all, I want to see mesh quality, 2D mesh quality, and we have special button here. and it's not a standard generator function. It was came from PoligonSoft, and I can press it. And I see mesh quality report, and here are 66 elements with two small angle and 77 elements with bad aspect ratio, and here elements with too small edge. And I can press correct button to try to solve these problems. Here is the result, and 0 here, 0 here, and 70 small elements. This position, I will close it. Now mesh quality is better. Now I can generate 3D. In previous versions, you need to make it like 3D mesh, so you need to go to edit mesh and fill this tab. Select algorithm navigate 3D and select this, create this new rules. For 3D, they're the same like for 2D mesh. So minimum element size, maximum element size, and finesses or mesh quality. And usually I use fine mesh quality for 3D mesh. But in this version, we have this button, compute 3D mesh, and all rules, all algorithms will be created automatically. So I click here on mesh 1 and I press this compute 3D mesh button. And generation starts. Finished. And I see the number of 3D elements here, number of 2D elements is here, and mesh computation succeed. So I close it. And at the end of this mesh generation, I need to make some operation with mesh 1, main mesh. Right mouse button click and select create groups from geometry to tabs, and I use this one. So I select three model, three these bodies inside my main object partition 1. I select it and I see it here, and I press apply and close. And now my 3D elements were put it here to these groups. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of 3D elements, and this is the end of 3D mesh generation. Now I can save my results. I can save it mesh generator format file and use it later again to remesh for remeshing, for example. But for PoligonSoft, I need to export these results in some other file to some other file, and I press right button here and use export menu and that file, and here I can select name and press save, and file is saved. Mesh is saved to a new file. So I can close mesh generator. Now I will use PoligonSoft master. Press open geometry file button and select alone here and the units millimeters. OK button and go to my folder and see this file. So it loaded. And here is a question. Do you want to save previous simulation parameters and so on? And now I can prepare this model for simulation like I did it in previous video. I show you how to generate 3D mesh. Thank you very much. Bye.